Hi, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
Welcome back. We are so excited today because we have a special guest, Joe Dillon. Joe has a master's degree in finance and completed specialized training in negotiation and mediation. He founded Equitable Mediation Services, and that offers a more peaceful and dignified path towards divorce.
So, we learned from our season one that one of our most popular episodes was on the loss or death of a parent. And that was the first episode we've done on what is referred to as ACEs, adverse childhood events. And there are many ACEs: any type of abuse, child neglect, mental illness, parental or household substance use or alcoholism, witnessing domestic violence. Well, one of the ACEs that is the most common is when there's parent separation or divorce. And as a result of that, we really wanted to highlight this topic. We have a guest on the show who I think is just perfect, who's really devoted his career to navigating families through divorce in a way that really minimizes the stressful effects on children and has their best interests in mind. And I would point listeners to healthychildren.org has a handout that's entitled Childhood Adversity, Buffering Stress and Building Resilience. And it says, for many families, events happen that are unpredictable. These events can be traumatic and affect how a child feels and behaves. For example, when parents make the hard decision to separate or divorce, it can be very confusing for young children. They may act out, cry or feel sad, lose developmental milestones, or have trouble sleeping. Some have problems concentrating and have a hard time at school. So I'm really excited about this discussion.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
Joe, we are so excited to have you on our show. And I know when I first learned about you and your business, one of the things that really drew me to have you on our show is that you clearly are very motivated to help parents walk through this so that they can do this in the best way possible for their child. And I
Right.
know you're also partially inspired by your own story. And I was hoping you would take a few moments to introduce our audience to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself as well as your story.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the audience because absolutely, Vivian, you bring up an important point that the children are the sort of littlest victims of divorce, right? We as adults are so wrapped up in our own thing that sometimes we forget that there is collateral, if you will, in the process, and we need to be very careful about the impact the divorce will have on children. So, a little bit about me, just personally, professionally. Been mediating 28 years in private practice with equitable mediation for 17. And my background, as you mentioned, is in finance. And really, when I think about divorce, I think about it as a parenting plan with a financial component. That's what a divorce is. Kids, my dad was in construction. Whenever I talk about divorce and people with children, I say the parenting plan is the concrete foundation on which your divorce house will be built. You wouldn't put up the walls, you wouldn't put up the roof first, you don't put in the windows, you make sure you have a solid foundation, and that is the parenting plan. And I'd like to spend some time today talking about what that means.
Yeah.
Myself and my parents, they didn't really get that. They litigated their divorce. And as we'll explore, I'm sure today, I'm a mediator. I try to help people avoid attorney involvement, litigation, adversarial divorces. They went back and forth. I was a teenager. Of course, as doctors, you both know, teenagers are in a really tough place. The hormones going, and it's all about me. And how could you do this to me? And the impact that it had on me was pretty severe because my parents were so busy litigating and fighting, they kind of forgot about me. And I just sort of quietly suffered through it and really had to spend a lot of time working on my own emotions and what I was feeling and what I was going through. I was really angry. And I really truly believe it was because my folks completely, really mostly ignored me through the process. And they litigated, and I sat in the back of the courtroom and did all that stuff. And we don't, as adults, sometimes understand the profound impact our words, our actions have. So that's what I want to bring in here today. And that's what I'm always pushing in my practice, where I'm saying, if your kids were sitting in this room right now watching the two of you, what would they think of you? That's a powerful question. So hopefully we'll have some time to talk about that as well. So I come at it both as a practitioner as well as the child of a litigated divorce.
Right. No, this is what our podcast is all about, both being experts and experiencing it firsthand as, for us moms and pediatricians, right?
Certainly.
So, why don't you talk a little bit about your life experience being a child of divorce? Maybe highlight a little bit about what it was like before the split happened, living in that household, and then leading up to the separation and divorce.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sylvia. And one of the things that I think as adults we really underestimate is the intellect of our children. They know what's going on. They're observant. Kids are sponges, man. If you don't want someone to know something, don't tell a kid. Don't be around kids. Kids are they're like radars up, right? And when I was as a child, I noticed the patterns. My parents would go from sitting on the couch next to each other to watching TV in separate rooms, sleeping in the same room, sleeping in separate rooms. Dad would
Mhm.
come home really late on purpose so he wouldn't have to see mom. It really, you're as a kid and you're watching this unfold and you know something's wrong, but you're not old enough to really understand what this all means. It started maybe when I was around 11, 12 years old, where it really, really got worse and worse. There was always arguing prior to that, but as an observant child and watching this all unfold, I'll never forget, as I never got the conversation from my parents. The way I found out they were getting a divorce was my dad was driving out of the driveway with his car filled with stuff. So, listeners, let's just emphasize the point that that is not the right way to do this. Just
Yeah.
want to really, unfortunately, some people don't think that way. And I remember my mom just apologizing and crying. And I said to her, I'm like, first of all, if you didn't think I knew what was going on, come on, right? Like, well, I'm not living under a rock. And the second thing, which I think really shocked her, was she was so apologetic and I'm sorry through her tears. And I was like, you know what? I am relieved. And I remember stopped and what do you mean? I said, do you know what it's like to live in this house with you all screaming at each other and then silent for months at a time? And I'm not really sure which end of this uh, conversation is going to be happening. Is it silence? Is it screaming? Is it polite? And I'm like, I'm just relieved. Like silence. Thank goodness.
Can you describe a little bit more personally about the emotions that you felt during this time? Like, how do you feel like that affected your life, during the time that this was happening?
Yeah, certainly. So, a number of ways. The first I would say is I was very scared. So, my folks, my background is Irish and Italian. So, two very calm, level headed, nationalities, quiet folk, real, just not demonstrative at all. Uh, so, there's a lot of yelling, and yelling is scary. And I'm an only child. So, I found comfort by hiding in a closet, which was good fun. And so I had my stuffed animal go in the closet or grab a book or whatever, just stay out of the way, basically. That was scary. So the yelling, and it was so erratic that you always felt like you were walking on eggshells. You never knew if there was going to be an explosion, if mom and dad were talking or they weren't. Confusion also set in because sometimes they'd be screaming and then you'd see them like holding hands. And, as a kid, you're looking at this and saying, well, okay, I thought you weren't talking to each other because you haven't talked to each other in 2 months, and now all of a sudden you're la, 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 la. So that was really confusing. Then really anger. That was the most powerful one. I was angry that I had to make accommodations in my life as a teenager, that my dad just took off. I didn't see him. There was all these things happening where I was spending time in my mom's lawyer's office or in the courtroom or just my life was on hold. It was like suspended animation for years, not knowing what was happening. And so I was very angry, pushed a lot of people away, really As a kid, you don't recognize that. People are just like, "Well, this guy's a jerk. I'm not gonna hang out with him." And it really kind of pushed a lot of folks away even after they got divorced in high school, even in college, even after college. This went on for a long time, and then finally, I believe it or not, at age 30, I hit this wall and I said, "Okay, you're gonna have a heart attack if you don't really process what happened, even though it's been 15 years." And I really sat down, did the work, and said, "Okay, this is not good. I need to really course correct." And I took a very hard right turn and made that conscientious effort to acknowledge that happened. It wasn't my fault. It didn't happen to me. It happened around me, I guess. And I said, well, that those folks are adults. They made their own choices. I'm sad that my father chose not to stay in my life. I never saw him or heard from him again after my folks got divorced. So sad about that. Sad about my mom was so severely impacted that her life stopped at age 45. She never dated. She really didn't have a lot of friends, didn't really do much. So her life was ruined in my estimation. And I made that decision that that was not going to happen to me. And so that's another thing that folks, even for all the anger they're spewing at the time, they don't realize the impact it has right back at them internally. That if they go through a process like a divorce in an adversarial way, it's damaging the other person, it's damaging themselves, it's damaging their kids, it's draining their bank accounts. There's no good that comes out of this. So that's my message to people is no matter how angry you are, remember your kids, remember yourself, and make sure that you keep those emotions in check.
No, that's very good perspective. You had mentioned that you had made accommodations in your life during, the teenage years when this was going on. Can you maybe give examples of that?
Sure. A perfect example, I played soccer and I had to quit soccer to get a job because my mom at the time, I know it's not correct to say these days, but she was a stay-at-home mom. So we say she worked inside the home. She was raising me, and that was a decision. And, back in the day, your parents could live on one income. It was a little different. And I think as she got an inkling that something was wrong, she got a part-time job in a jewelry store, but that still paled in comparison to what my father was making. So there we were now, he leaves, she kept the house, we're trying to run the house. I had to contribute to my own things, whereas prior to that, I lived a very comfortable middle-class existence where my folks could have bought me a car or could have paid for my car insurance or could have easily paid for my college, those things, and I then had to contribute. On top of that, the other thing that happened was my dad, being in construction and being a very handy guy, he was the man around the house. He did all the things that needed doing. Now dad leaves, I'm never once had started a lawnmower, and my mom is looking at me like, "Well, you need to figure out how to fix the lawnmower, how to cut down that tree, how to clean the gutters, how to repair the broken electrical outlet," and I'm like a 14-year-old kid, and I'm like, "Well," and she wants me to do electrical work around our house, which, by the way, is really bad idea for a 14-year-old who's a licensed electrician, but I did my very best I could, and that was how I was spending my time rather than hanging out with my friends or playing sports or going out with my girlfriend. I was really beholden to the house, and it had a significant impact on me, and that's a lot where that anger came from, where you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, my friends are going to parties and hanging out at the football game, and I've gotta clean the gutters." Like, this is this is not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like you had to become an adult too early, right? Financially and, with real responsibilities in the house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, not just
Yeah.
clean your room, right? My mom, God bless her, she worked multiple jobs and I remember she worked, in retail, and retail stores close at like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm by myself unsupervised, which, these days people would probably call, youth services, but I was at home by myself after school until she got home. And now I will say the positive from that, it's a double-edged sword. I had to cook. I had to do laundry. I had to clean. So my wife adores me for that because in our house, I cook, I clean, I do the laundry, and she's like, there is a silver lining to this. Something good did come out of it. So I will say, I will thank my mom. She'd write instructions on how to cook, and this is before the internet, right? She'd have to write all, put the oven on 350, do this, and so that was a positive. But still, that's how I was spending my time, and wasn't exactly, again, great. Rather have my, carefree childhood rather than having to run a household.
Tell us about, in light of this, personal experience, how do you take parents through developing a parenting plan? Where do you start?
So we have a philosophy. This is my personal philosophy. Folks, because even adults, they're so overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
ask them, how do you think your kids are feeling when you're going to drop this news, or when if they already know the uncertainty of what's going to happen? So I I say, as parents, think of your kids literally as in basically crawl, walk, run, right? We all learn that's how we get through as mobile humans. That's how we start. So let's start with the crawling. And the crawling is high level. You want a parenting plan where it's 50-50, or where one of you has more overnights with the kids. Let's just start really 50,000 feet. Okay, 50-50. Then okay, what does that look like? Is that 1 week on, 1 week off? Is that switching every day? And then we come down to 30,000 feet. And we keep doing that until we dial in what I call the base plan. That's just a normal Tuesday or a normal Saturday during the school year. It's not a holiday, it's not a summer, it's not a break week. Then from there, we also do the same for holidays, summers, then exceptions. And what you do is you get some momentum going. And then I also start with parenting, and little secret for the listeners, hopefully I'm not revealing my mediator secret here, is that really, I've never run across a set of parents who have been able to, at least with a straight face, look at me and say, "No, Joe, I do not want what's best for my children. No, I do not like my kids. I don't love them. I don't want them." People, you can trick them into getting along, right?
Yes.
And so then when I go, "Look at you guys, you're doing so great. You agreed on this parenting plan. Let's talk child support. Yay." That really helps.
No, I love how your mediation is focused around the kids, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
let's talk about the child needs a voice at
Right.
this at the table. And I love how your mediation style kind of is that child's voice, right?
So I think for listeners, it's important to recognize, not to underestimate the impact it has on the kids, how observant they are, but also, as I shared, to make sure if you are going to go through this path, speak to them, sit down with them, share with them what's going on. You don't have to give them the whole detailed story, but you do have to explain to them about what's happening with mom and dad. So
I think that's such a good point. I feel like there's almost a generational difference there where we've learned that you talk to your children about these hard things, right? We
right.
as pediatricians we talk about when you're talking to your children about death, you use the words that they died, right? You talk to your children about adoption, that used to not be a thing. You talk to your children about sex, like it. We know they're absorbing so much from that world around them, and we want to be there to be the ones having honest conversations with them, not only so they have a chance to voice their concerns and to hear it
Right.
from you, but also so that they know going forward, they trust that you are telling them, you're not surprising them with something
Mhm.
catastrophic.
Where do you feel like in that process, and I know it varies from family to family and situation to situation, but in your opinion, where along that process do you feel like communication that things aren't going well should begin to take place? Should it happen once the parents have decided to separate and divorce, or earlier than that?
I believe it should happen once they've decided to divorce, and also once they've gotten into mediation and have a parenting plan. Kids
Yeah.
are going to ask a lot of questions.
Mhm.
And the worst thing as a parent, we know this, right? Parents, we kids look up to you to have all the answers. What do you mean you don't know? Right? You're the superhero. You've got all the answers. You're in charge. I believe parenting plans are the number one most important thing. It's after that session where they can go home. Kids may have the idea, or they may have said something, but at least now they'll have information that says, okay, we sat down, we talked, we've decided this is what the plan's going to be. Here's the days with mom, the days with dad. I really think kids are afraid, right? They're afraid of the unknown. So even if you've mentioned it before you enter the mediation process, personally, I think ideally is after that first session, at least in our world, when they have a parenting plan that they can share with them and explain how it's going to work and what's going to happen moving forward.
I can imagine based on, how you've shared your own personal story, there's so much fear of the unknown, of the change that's happening in the life of a child, and
Right.
having a really well laid out parenting plan gives them some type of stability of this is what the future will look like.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, we also want kids to feel empowered. And if they, for that out of control feeling, I do have clients. I'm working with a couple right now, and they're like, hey, listen, I have a teenager and we want him to feel empowered. So we structured their parenting plan that says, this is how many days each of you, mom and dad, are going to get. And then you can sit with him on Sundays and say, this week, I think I'd like to spend 3 with dad and 4 with mom, but I got a game next week. So I'm going to spend 4 with dad because he coaches. And you guys can work that out together.
Yeah.
Right, right. Which also I think gives the child, and in this case a teenager, a sense of some control in a situation where they feel very out of control. Like you described so well in your own adolescence, that completely out of control, fear of the unknown, not knowing what was happening next. As much of that as we can take off the child's plate is better. So
Yeah,
I love
we have
that, what you're
enough.
describing.
The kids are so anxious and nervous. We don't need to, as you said, right, Vivian, we don't need to pile anything else on their plate. They've got enough.
So, I want to thank our guest speaker today, Joe Dillon, for coming on our episode and sharing his personal story of divorce and what he does in formulating the parenting plan in his mediation. I do want to point our listeners to his webpage, equitablemediation.com. It has some great resources, courses, and kits learning about mediation and divorce options. So please check out the website. It is very carefully written, and it is a plethora of information that I think would be useful for a parent who's undergoing a divorce. Thank you so much for coming on our show and being a special guest today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really a lot of fun, and I really appreciate the conversation.
Yes, thank you.
This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin.
And I'm Joe Dillon.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.